I'm Steve, and today we're reading through the chapter DemonSoul, Part 3. Enjoy. DemonSoul, Part 3. The very next morning, Yoren rose at dawn, as was his custom. Never before had he felt this close to achieving his goal, and he was nearly bursting with anticipation. He had gleaned some information as to the beast's possible whereabouts from the tavern's patrons, and questionable though his sources might be, he was eager to set out on his quest. In preparation for the hunt, he slipped on his lightest chainmail and his riding boots. His shimmering shield strapped across his back, sword at his side, spear in hand, he stepped out into the fresh morning air. His proud warhorse was saddled and waiting for him just outside the inn, waves of light rippling across its lustrous coat. He freed it from its tether and stroked its muzzle absent-mindedly. He would ride all morning towards the mountains, and then he glanced casually down the eastern road, turning his steed about, and all thoughts abandoned him. A dark shadow was crossing the path just outside the village, silent as a ghost. It towered over the miserable huts of Nordsburg, dwarfing even the two-story inn as it prowled forward on all fours, cat-like. Its black scales reflected no light, absorbing the sun's rays like a nightmare come to life. Giant bat-like wings were folded across its back, and its gigantic tail was twice again as thick as Yoren's horse was tall. All of the horrendous rumors, which Yoren had assumed to be gross exaggerations, did no justice to this creature most foul. Nonetheless, having lusted for glory his entire life, Yoren would not be deterred. Showing a rare form of courage which few men possess, he mastered his steed and urged him onward, charging the vile demon as he shouted a mighty battle cry. When he came within range, he hurled his hefty spear at the beast's wings with all his might, hoping to pierce the beast where its scales were the weakest, and thus prevent its flight. The spear shattered upon its target, but the demon did not so much as flinch or even blink. Indeed, it had not even felt the spear, and was completely oblivious to the valiant assault being launched against it. It was just passing through, and gave no thought to the little screaming man nearby. When his spear failed, Yoren drew his sword and charged. His noble warhorse pounded the ground, racing forward with its master's courage, frothing at the bit, and was able to pull even with the beast, just in time to be felled by an accidental flick of its tail. Yoren only barely avoided being crushed by his mount as it went down, but he sprung from the dirt almost instantly. He began hacking madly at the beast's tail as it went by, his sword bouncing repeatedly off the hellspawn scales, but to no effect. When the creature had finally passed him by, fading into the distance without ever realizing that it had been assaulted by the mighty knight of Vorenthal, Yoren threw his dented blade down and turned back towards the village in disgust, leaving his warhorse on the field where it had fallen, and abandoning the sword given him by his father. Once proud Yoren stormed angrily through the streets of Nordsburg, stripping off and shedding bits and pieces of his shiny armor as he went, until there was nothing left. He tossed his beautiful shield through the window of the tavern, and kicked his expensive chainmail into a puddle by the road, before storming off on foot, defeated and humiliated. That night, the small tavern of Nordsburg was almost overrun with merry patrons, and the entire village gathered under one roof to recount over and over again the amusing tale of Yoren Vorenthal and his encounter with the demon. Much more was made of his departing antics than of his valiant attack, And the story was told over and over again of the mad look in his eye, of his mad rants as he departed, and of the way in which he neglected to even procure a new steed for his long journey home, setting off on foot in his folly. Indeed, despite the brevity of his stay, Joran was to be the toast of the Nordwald for many more months to come. It was assumed, of course, that the encounter had at last knocked some sense into the boy, and that he would now realize that his pursuit had been futile. He was just a man, after all, no matter what his pride might have him believe. Perhaps now he would settle down in his father's lands, and find some noble woman to marry. In truth, the Nordwalders were certain that they had seen the last of foolish Jorn Vorenthal. But that only shows how little they knew of the boy. Have I mentioned yet that he was somewhat obstinate? So that's DemonSoul, Part 3. Let me know what you think of the length of this story. Does the expanded format in 7 parts work? Or would it be better in a more condensed version, a shorter format as a single chapter, a bit more like the rest of the book? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I look forward to reading them, and I'll catch you next time.